Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
So hello, my name is Maxwell Alexander Drake. I am an award-winning novelist. I was the lead fiction writer for a massive video game from Sony called EverQuest Next. I'm writing a video game currently with a German video company that I can't talk about. I've written stage plays, musicals, comedies, comic books, graphic novels. I've written for other tabletop games like Shadowrun. I have worked on TV scripts, movie scripts. Literally, there's almost nothing in the fiction world, no medium that I haven't worked in now. I've also been teaching writing classes all over the world for about the last 15 years. I have several creative writing books that are out that are all very highly reviewed. People tell me they're really good. I don't know. I haven't read them myself, but they say they're good. Today, I'm going to kind of do something a little different. Had a couple little hiccups in my health here recently. And so I'm dealing with some things that are kind of taking some of my time away from being able to produce some stuff. So I wanted to get something out. And what I'm going to read today it's actually a movie script. So I wrote this children's movie script about 4 years ago now, and it's sold twice. And both times it almost got greenlit. As a matter of fact, the last time, it was literally the last meeting that I had with the production studio that was going to buy it. Had this huge meeting with all their top people, and they're like, great, you should get a contract in about 10 to 12 days. And then 6 days after that is when the world shut down to COVID. So if they ended up not being able to do anything with it. And so I've got this script that's won, awards in different script contests. It's been bought twice by 2 different producers. It's actually in development right now with a producer friend of mine, but that's a little different because I'm kind of doing a little more of a handshake thing with him. It's a great story, and I really do want to get this out. So I decided that I was going to kind of do a hybrid script novel because I don't have the bandwidth right now to actually write this as a novel. Over these last couple of weeks and over these next couple of weeks, I've been kind of adding some things to it. So if you've never read a script, scripts are very interesting to read because they're for movie people. They're not for the end user fan base. So there's a lot of stuff that's stripped out. There's a lot of stuff that you kind of have to fill in the blanks because a movie's going to bring in a director and a choreographer and art directors and actors and costume designer and all these different people. They're going to add all of that stuff that as a novelist, I normally have to do myself because as a novelist, you're everything. That's kind of what I'd like to read today. I want to read just the opening of it. It's different because it is a script. This is not a novel, but hopefully I've added enough to be able to pique your imagination and you'll be able to see the world that I'm creating through this script that I'm going to be releasing here. Hopefully within the month, this will be released from me and then you can get the whole thing. So I guess I'm just going to launch into it. So it is in script form, which is exactly how it's going to be released. Can't see what I see. So there's a lot of things in a script, like some camera directions. Like the very first thing is the word fade in. I'm going to skip all that stuff because you really don't need any of that for the enjoyment of the read. But I am still going to read something. So like in a script, everything is set up in scenes. And so you have scene headings. And so I will read those and then I'll go on as I go through. Cover of an old-fashioned fairy tale book. You see the cover of a leather-bound fairy tale book. It looks worn, as if it's been read many times. Snurse is written in big fancy letters across the top. Below, in slightly smaller font, are the words, "A magical, magical fairy tale." At the bottom is a name, Maxwell Alexander Drake. Opening the cover, you flip through pages filled with colorful 2D watercolor images, typical of a children's book. Logos of companies you assume must have been instrumental in the production of this book. Past the logos, you come upon a page with a curious-looking figure, Snurse. Fizbear, teen, looks like a mix between a hobbit and a teddy bear. Cute, hairy, intelligent-looking, depicted here as a 2D watercolor drawing. Wearing plain-looking medieval farmer's clothing and a friendly smile. Just to the side of this Snurse figure are some text. Once upon a time, in a magical land, there lived a brave Fizbear named Snurse. The voice of some benevolent story narrator fills your mind. Once upon a time, in a magical land, there lived a brave Fizbear named Snurse. To your surprise, the water drawing of Snurse waves hello to you. And while Snurse was a very brave Fizbear indeed, the text swirls, moving over Snurse. Snurse is now wearing a suit of armor complete with sword and shield. Snurse gives the sword an experimental wave. He was also a sad little Fizbear. Snurse frowns and nods, agreeing with the narrator. For even though this world was a magical land, Fizbears could not use magic. Snurse gives an exaggerated shake of his head, eyes filled with sadness, his mouth cocked in disappointment. This bothered Snurse very much. Why can't Fizbears use magic? He asked. Snurse shrugs his shoulders as he mouths, why can't Fizbears use magic, as the narrator says it. One day, Snurse decided he'd fix this whole Fizbears can't use magic problem. Snurse nods with excitement. The only issue was, how? Snurse shrugs, for he has no idea either. As far as anyone knew, no Fizbears had ever used magic, not once. But no Fizbear had ever been as brave or as smart as Snurse either. Snurse gives a heroic smile and a wink. So he did the only thing one can do in a situation like this. He sat down and gave the problem a good old-fashioned thinking. A rock materializes, and Snurse sits down. He puts his chin on his fist and gives this problem a good old-fashioned thinking. He thought and he thought until finally he struck on an idea. Snurse jumps up, eyes wide, and snaps his fingers while mouthing the next line. I bet it's because no Fizbear has ever wanted to be a wizard as much as me, he exclaimed. Snurse figured if he just wished very hard about becoming a wizard, the magical energy of the world would hear his plea and gift him with the ability to use magic. Surely it would. It must, right? With a big smile, Snurse nods in emphatic agreement. So he reached deep inside himself, focusing on his desire to become a wizard. He then broadcast his feelings out into the universe. Snurse concentrates really hard. Then he begs the universe to grant him his wish. Oh, please, he begged. Let me become a wizard. And you know what? The magical energy of the world did take notice. It heard Snurse's plea. Blue wisps of magical energy rise below a shocked-looking Snurse to swirl around him. His face lights up as the watercolors creating Snurse armor and sword morph into a cool-looking wizard's outfit, complete with magic wand. And to his surprise, he felt the powerful flows of magic coursing through his body. Snurse jumps around for joy, waving his wand. Each time, sparks of magic shoot from the wand's tip. Then, from the side of the page, a shadow falls over Snurse. Fear in his eyes, Snurse's elation evaporates. And not a moment too soon, either. For just then, a dark and dangerous shadow monster attacked the kingdom. A shadow monster creeps onto the page and starts attacking a medieval-looking city. People scream. An army of mounted soldiers with lances ride out of the city to do battle. The king's army rode out to do battle with this evil monster, but they were no match for the shadow's power, and all hope seemed lost. But the shadow sweeps over the army and it disappears. Snurse looks horrified. He remembers the wand in his hand, and a determined look falls over him. But our brave hero Snurse, with his newfound powers over the forces of magic, come to the rescue. Stay back, he shouted. I'll take care of this silly shadow monster problem. Snurse throws his hands up to warn the people away. Stay back the townfolk did, for it was a dangerous but glorious battle between the evil shadow monster and the brave wizard Snurse. Snurse shoots magic from his wand as the monster lunges at him. The ferocious battle rages on. And while the shadow monster put up a grand fight, in the end the creature fell to the magic of Snurse the wizard. A bolt of magic strikes the shadow monster and it silently screams, dissolving into nothing. With evil vanquished, the kingdom celebrated Snurse's victory with a huge party. All the townfolk cheered his name with pride. A large crowd forms around Snurse, all cheering, Snurse, Snurse, Snurse. But no one was more proud of Snurse than his own mother and father. Snurse's parents, Bonota, plump middle-aged Fizbear with a kind motherly face, here is a 2D watercolor drawing, and Diesel, skinny middle-aged Fizbear, also as a 2D watercolor drawing, are in the crowd, smiling proudly at their son. Snurse, Snurse, Snurse. The crowd with their shouts fade away. Bonota's shout changes from adoring to more of a question than a calling. Snurse! Snurse? Snurse! We dissolve to black. Come on, dearie. It's time to wake up. So that's the opening of it. And then obviously we wake up with Snurse in his room and it's no longer 2D, it'll be 3D. And then we go on from there.
Hi,
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I am super thrilled to have the amazing and talented Mr. Maxwell Alexander Drake with us today. Hi, Drake. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am so excited. I'm such a huge fan of your work. And by the way, you did amazing reading that because it honestly translated really well as a novel. You didn't had all the crazy scripts terminology in there. And I was like, oh, nice job.
I mean, it's there on the page. I just skipped it
It
because
worked
when you're
really well.
reading it, you're going to skip it.
You did really well. It was really exciting. I was cheering for Snark as well. And then he woke up and I was like, oh, I feel so bad for you.
Yeah, because he doesn't have magic.
No, I kind of gathered that. I feel so bad. I was like, oh, you poor thing. I'm so sorry. So let's jump in, sweetie. Where did this idea come from? Because you tell us about it. I need to know the background of the actual story because this is why we're here.
This is the weirdest story conception that I've ever had in my entire life. I don't do a lot of scripts initially. I've taken some of my prose work and turned them into scripts or whatever, but this is literally raw script. I got it as a movie idea. I wanted to do it as a movie. I wrote it as a movie. I am writing a novelization of it, but again, I don't have the bandwidth for it right now. So I kind of want to get something out now for my fans, adding a few little things and kind of tweaking it so it's a little easier to read because scripts are notoriously difficult to read. And I'm glad that I went from a novelist to a script writer because as a novelist, you're responsible for everything. Literally everything in the world, you have to write it because you're the cameraman, the actors and the director and everything. And you have to give that information to the readers. Script writers are not allowed to do any of that. They're actually smacked. Like, don't do that. The only time we're allowed to actually say any narration is if it's like, okay, so if they drop a matchbook and that matchbook is absolutely paramount to understanding the plot, then you can mention the matchbook. Otherwise, don't mention the matchbook. Shut your mouth. We'll figure it out. And so for the layman that hasn't read a lot of scripts, I mean layman to scripts, because I will send scripts to my novelist friends and they're like, I can't see any. I don't understand what you're talking about here. This is terrible. And I'm like, literally, it's perfect. One of the funniest was the cartoon that I'm working on, Fiend Folly. I had written the pilot script for it and I'd sent it out to a bunch of friends for a comment. And they were like, yeah, this doesn't seem funny at all. Since I do a little art and animation, I did a little mock-up of the first couple of minutes of the pilot. And I showed them that. And they were like, oh my God, this is hilarious. How come you didn't write this? And I'm like, literally wrote exactly that.
That is so awesome. You just narrow it down essential core because you're like, no, that's exactly what the script says. Like,
Exactly.
we can't see it. Like, but it's there. I promise. That's what it says.
It's a little dangerous for me to kind of step into this where because I'm going to release this as a novel, as a print book. I mean, the last time it had a $40 million budget. I'm a little shy of $40 million. I can't produce it myself. It's a great story. It's this wonderful, wonderful story. It's probably one of the best things I've ever written, even though it's for children. Like, it is fun for adults. It's fun for anyone who just loves a good fantasy story. It has tons of great moral thematic elements, friendship, overcoming adversity, overcoming conflicts. Really, it's about overcoming your own self-doubt. One of the things that I love about the opening of that, in the novel world, as a published author, the publishing industry will tell you, don't you dare ever start in a dream. We will slap you down. We'll never publish anything that starts in a dream. And I get that because most of the time it's done poorly. The medium of movies is very, very different. I have 120 pages to tell an entire story, setup, rise in tension, the whole 9 yards. And so one of the reasons why I love that dream sequence that I just read is you as the audience. Well, first of all, remember, the story's geared to 8 to 12-year-olds. Maybe you're an adult and you're watching this or whatever, but it's not geared for you. You should still absolutely enjoy it and have a fun time with it. It's only about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes of screen time. You learn the characters, you learn the world, you learn what Snurse's number one desire is. So we know he wants magic above everything else. And then we're going to meet him and he doesn't have magic and his friend has magic and like all this crazy stuff is going on. But we totally empathize with him instantly because of that dream. The crazy thing is it's a mini version of the entire movie. Like, there is going to be a big bad and there is shadow monsters. They're not necessarily the same thing. So they're kind of combined in that. It is really a 2-minute, like, here's the whole movie. It's almost like the 5-act play and how Shakespeare wrote. In the movie industry, that's the beautiful thing. They get it. They're like, oh my goodness, in 1.5 minutes, you've done everything you need to do to prime the audience for everything they need. The publishing industry would still poo-poo on that. And so when I do end up writing this as a novel, I'm going to have to maybe fight that if I'm going to sell this to someone else or whatever. This is how I think. This is what I love about writing. I love about the different mediums and thinking about different mediums and crossing from one medium to another. There's just so much technical stuff in addition to the beautiful art that really just tickles my fancy. You asked a question. So this is the weirdest, most absurd way. I've never created a story this way. So me and my wife were driving home 5 years ago, have no idea where we're coming from, have no idea what we're doing. I do remember where we were at here in Las Vegas. And we were stopped at a red light, and there was a car in front of me that had this license plate that had a really interesting name. And it had Snurse on the license plate. And I went, wow, that is a really cool character name. And my wife said, you're an idiot. That says senior nurse. It says SR nurse. And I was like, oh, there is an R in there. I didn't even see the R. I just read Snurse. And literally by the time we got home, we were about 15 minutes from home. I had an entire story written in my head of this Snurse character from a license plate that didn't even say Snurse. I had just misread it.
Drake, I can't stop laughing because absolutely priceless and classic and amazing. Because I'm like, oh my God, who would ever have a license plate like that? That is brilliant. And then your wife's like, the senior nurse. I was like, not nearly as creative as I thought.
Funny thing is, I've seen that car at least a dozen times over the last 5 years. I've taken a picture of the license plate just because I ended up writing an entire movie script off of somebody who wrote senior nurse. And obviously they're, a nurse has been a nurse for a long time and they're really skilled in their career. But for whatever reason, the way the license plate hit me when I was looking at it, just read as Snurse.
So tell me, darling, you have been writing for a while. You have been doing this in many, many different genres. Which one is your favorite? Do you have one?
So actually, I don't write in a lot of genres per se. For the most part, on fantasy. I do have some short stories out there that are sci-fi that have done really well and stuff like that. I've done a little bit of horror. I do write romance under a female name that nobody knows. I know you're going to want, but it's not going to happen. So just letting you know that right now. That is a female author that's writing that. And to break her confidence by claiming that some misogynistic penis dweller would actually be the one writing that, I don't want to break that sanctity. We have this great, confidentiality agreement between us.
Please, let's keep it that way.
Yeah. No, I do like romance because I am a romantic at heart. I say this all the time when I'm teaching because people come up to me and go, oh, what's hot? What should I write? I'm like, that's the worst question you should ever ask as a writer. Don't ever write. Because if you aren't a huge fan of it, you're going to write it wrong and you're just doing a disservice to that genre. I am a huge fantasy fan. I'm a huge kids movie fan. I'm a huge comic book fan, a huge video game fan. I'm a huge stage play, musical fan. I am a huge comedy cartoon fan. I'm a huge romance fan. Like I am the epitome of the big fan of each one of these things that I deal with. I'm an okay sci-fi. I like one of the movie scripts that I sold was a sci-fi movie. It never got made. It's kind of a reimagining of the Stargate movie, but from the Hindi mythos. It's still kind of the same premise. It's Earth connected to an alien civilization, blah, 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 blah. But instead of Egyptian, it's all Hindi. That was really fun. I actually ended up pitching a TV show in India. It didn't get made. That's kind of the story of my life when it comes to video. That was probably one of the best TV series that excited me the most. It was 2 levels of fish out of water. Basically, it's an American FBI agent that's sent to India to help find a serial killer. So we have an American in India. That's very different. And the political and police and everything like that is different. But when he gets there, he has all these weird run-ins and he starts realizing that he actually is seeing and talking to every single one of their 300 million gods. And some of them are on the serial killer side and some of them are against the serial killer, but he's the only one that for whatever reason is communicating with these people. So you also have this monotheistic person going to a polytheistic world, but not only just going to the polytheistic world, but also like actually interacting with the polytheistic gods. It was funny and crazy. I would have loved to have done it. And that's a part of the nature of the beast in video is you do a lot of pitching and you create a lot of stories and no one ever even gets to hear that. Literally, I think that's the first time I've ever publicly even talked about that television show.
That is so fascinating. I was like, you really should convert that into a novel. I'm all into this, talking theology and all these things just crashing into each other. I was like, oh my God, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you actually have a favorite in your different mediums or different genres? Or do you because you like it all?
I do. Unfortunately, it's getting pushed behind, but this cartoon that was hopefully season 1 of Guards I was hoping to drop it this year. It's a very small thing. It might be pitched to a studio because it fits their time frame because 12 minutes long. I'm not going to say which studio that is, but I might, have a chance there. But really, it was designed for an internet release is what it's designed for. It's 10 episodes, 12 minutes long, animated cartoon, very funny. It's on hold now because of my health issue. I've alluded to this. I was diagnosed with cancer a few months ago. This is my third week of treatment that I'm in. For you kids at home, it is the horror show that everyone says it is. Radiation chemotherapy is horrible, but prognosis is great. I got lucky, caught it really early. It's a great type of cancer to have, if there's such thing as a great type of cancer to have. Even though I'm having to go through radiation chemo for 7 weeks, higher than an 80% chance of remission, less than a 20% chance of it ever coming back. I still trying to work, trying to keep my brain focused. Chemo brain is a real thing. When you reached out to do this podcast, that's why I was like, so we either need to do it now or we need to do it in a couple months from now. Cause I don't have any idea. The deeper I go into this treatment, the more difficult it is on me and my brain and everything. The crazy thing about the cartoon is we have all the assets done. So that's one of the most expensive hardest parts is getting all the art done and all the 3D assets and all that. The cast is cast, the scripts are written. We literally last November, which is end of October is when I was diagnosed. November was when we were coming into the studio to start recording. And I was like, well, I'm going to put this on hold for a minute because the worst thing about being diagnosed with cancer is you are told you have cancer, but you're not given any details. So at the end of October, they were like, hey, so you have a really aggressive form of malignant cancer in your throat. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? They're like, that's all we're telling you. And when you Google that, it's like you have less than a 20% chance to live. If it was normal throat cancer caused by cigarette smoking, whatever, I would have had where it was at. My symptoms basically would put me at stage 4 and just statistically less than a 20%, 30% chance of surviving that. But they're like, but we don't know. So just wait until we run all these tests. And I'm like, but wait. And then, 2 months go by, a slew of tests. They're like, hey, good news. You actually got a break. And this is this thing that you have. And you're actually stage 1 because of it. And it's like, well, you could have at least hinted at that 2 months ago. Like 2 months ago, you basically told me I'm going to be dead in a year, but don't count on that. Just wait, give us 2 months to verify that. And it's like, wow. So that was rough, emotionally, rough on the family, rough on everything. But I'm a pretty glass half full kind of guy. 3 days after I was diagnosed, I was on stage teaching writing. And like when people found out that I'd just been diagnosed, they're like, why are you here? Like, I'm like, what? It's been 3 days. How long can you bitch about learning that you're going to be dead in a year? Come on, let's move on. I'm not political at all. I'm a fantasy writer, but it's why I have such a hard problem with this whole last 2 years of the pandemic. Like, I would rather die of a disease than hide in a house and literally not live life. Have no friends and no family and no life and no anything and just be wallow in misery. I would rather die of COVID. I just would. I'm going to get out there. I want to do things. I still had game nights. I still ran my writers groups. I still hung out with my family. What's the point of living if you're not living? And again, I'm not trying to be political. Nothing to do with any of that. Just relating that to now got something that kills 1 in 3. And I'm still like, yeah, no, still not good enough, universe. You got to try a little harder if you're going to take me down. As they said in Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying.
You have this energy and this amazing power of looking at life that most of us kind of miss sometimes. I know a lot of people, you said it very well. Some people are just waiting to be buried. They're not living. They're not even, nevertheless, thriving. They're barely surviving.
Yeah.
And every time the universe says, it's just going to rain today, they cry.
Yeah.
So to see you taking this, by the horns and say, bring it on, because we're still going to live. I love it. And the listeners can feel your passion. Like, okay, it's happening. It's real.
Right. Yeah. No
But I'm
denial.
still going to do it.
A lot of my family was like, you're in denial, aren't you? I'm like, no, I'm not, I have cancer. Like, I get that. But
Not in denial.
whatever. I mean, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do my thing. Because here's the reality. Let's say I have terminal cancer and I am dead in a year. I could still die today walking to my mailbox. Somebody could just run me over and kill me or whatever. Even if you have a terminal disease, doesn't mean that that's what's absolutely going to kill you, because there's so many things in the earth that can kill us. I just don't want to live life fearing every little thing. Now, on the flip side, I'm also not out free climbing or base jumping or robbing banks. I'm not doing stuff that's going to encourage my death. I want to enjoy life. I want to have fun. I'm a storyteller. I want to tell stories.
Changing up a little, because you are definitely into fiction, but you're also a nonfiction,
Mm,
both writer and instructor.
yes.
How did that come about? When did you switch into this world?
I can go back and say this is everything. My entire career, some people would say it's luck. I say you make your own luck. All the time, somebody will reach out to me. I'm really interested in writing in the video game industry. What is your suggestions on breaking in? And unfortunately, my advice is, well, just write so well that Sony's a fan of yours, and then they come to you and beg you to work for them. Because I don't know how to apply to the video game. The video game company I'm working for now, they were fans of mine, and they came and said, "Oh my God, how much money can we throw at you to get you to be a part of our process?" I don't know how to apply to video game companies. I didn't approach Shadowrun. The editor is a friend of mine and has been a fan of mine for a while. He's also an author and a great, writer on his own note. But so I don't know. And it's kind of the same thing with teaching. First of all, I never thought I would write. The funny thing about me is I don't have the pedigree for this. I have a remedial ninth grade English education. I'm hardcore dyslexic. I'm just as uneducated as you could possibly be when it comes to this subject, and never thought, like, if you had told a 14-year-old Drake that he would not only grow up to be a writer, but also teach grammar and writing, he would have punched you, like, just flat out. Even though I was a storyteller at the time, because again, I wrote my first book when I was 12. I loved telling stories, but I hated grammar. I hated English. I hated all this structure because as a dyslexic, so the dyslexic brain is really interesting. English is very difficult for us. In the dyslexic mind, everything we see is three-dimensional, everything. We don't see anything two-dimensional. Numbers to a point, but words and letters definitely are two-dimensional. That's why it is so hard, because our brain still spins them. Our brain still wants to look at this letter in 3 dimensions, and it doesn't exist. And so it's very difficult for us, but that's why we're such great storytellers, because stories are 3-dimensional. And so we make great script writers and great storytellers and all of that. But getting back to your question, my first book, which won awards, I was with a small press, and I was spending a lot of money, of my own money, on tour, going to conventions, going all this other stuff. And I've always had the gift for gab. I can talk. People enjoy listening to me, whatever. And somebody said, "You're so good at talking. If you actually created something like a little class or something like that, you might get a free booth or a free hotel or free this." And I'm like, well, I could do that. And I'm embarrassed because I don't even give the class anymore, because this is what everyone did. I created a how to build fictitious worlds class because it seems like every writer talks about how to build fictitious worlds. And so I just did that. But it was so well received that everyone was like, "You've got to do more." And that's really where it came from. It came from that. And then when that was successful and people really liked how I talked, I went, okay, well, maybe I should do something serious with this. Because one of the things that frustrates me about coming up in this industry, especially as a dyslexic and an uneducated one at that, no one actually taught anything. And I still believe this. I'm very against academia. I'm very against creative writing programs because they don't actually teach you anything. It's not practical. It's not usable. It should be an insult to them when I go to a Comic-Con or a Gen Con or whatever, and I do a 45-minute class, and somebody will come up to me and go, "I learned more from you in the last 45 minutes than the entire 6 years of my MFA program." And that's why in my classes, I always say, you will walk out of here a better writer today in 45 minutes. Today. Right now, I'm going to show you something that you will use right now, today, to improve your writing right now. And I'm tackling hardcore, thematic elements and allegories, sentence structure patterns, and information dissemination patterns. I'm not just going A, B, C, and this is how you spell it. I'm giving you the really hardcore, deep stuff. But it's why one of my creative books is a required read in a few divisions at Disney. They're very well reviewed because people are like, "Holy crap." Literally, this is how I teach. The way I'm talking to you right now, that's how I run all my classes. I don't do any type of formal anything. Just break it down. The crazy thing is I'm only teaching how I had to learn it. Everyone comes up and they're like, "Oh my God, you're so brilliant. You come up with all these theories that nobody's ever come up with on how to teach." I'm like, really? I'm just teaching you kind of the broken way. I'm mentally handicapped, and that's the only way I can understand it. So you're learning the mentally handicapped way. So I'm glad that you like it, but that's how I teach. But it resonates with them. I can take a very complex topic and in a very short amount of time, show you not only what it means and why it's important, but also show you how to implement it in your writing, how to use it in your writing to make it better. And I think that's the reason why I keep getting invited year after year. I'm the only author that's taught at Comic-Con San Diego for 14 years in a row. They have a big policy of never inviting somebody back twice in a row. They want you to skip years, and yet 14 years in a row, I'm there. I think there's a reason for that. And it is just my really blue collar kind of layman's way of looking at things. And I don't spout out academia and these rules that they just regurgitate without explaining like why is this rule here? Why is it important? Why is it important to think about it like this? Why do you need to, why is prose so different of a language than the verbal speaking of English? I say this all the time. If you write the way you talk, you're not going to tell great stories. I just believe that because the story may be cool, but the way you tell it is going to be blasé because you're just talking. We all talk terribly, and prose is a completely different language. I kind of just fell into it, and everybody just kept asking me back, and then they started throwing money at me, just like everyone else. I got a wife and kids and bills and house, and now the kids are going to college, and all this stuff has to be paid for somehow. And I don't have a real job. I don't do anything but this. So if somebody's willing to pay me for it, and I do love it. I love the podcast is doing great. We're at maybe 3 months we've been doing it. We're over 1,000 listeners now on the podcast. That's releasing your inner dragon. People tend to like kind of the way I view storytelling and story structure. So I love doing it. I love doing these interviews. I love doing my own podcast and so on and so forth. But I also really love teaching. I've got an entire shelf of books that have my name in them and the dedication that they sent it to me. They were like, hey, I really want to thank Maxwell Alexander Drake, because without his teaching, this book wouldn't even existed. And so I've got probably 100 books now sitting over there that just for whatever reason has me mentioned somewhere in the acknowledgments. And that's just such a deep honor and a deep, moving, kind of unexplainable accolade, because it's intangible. Literally, this shelf is in my office and nobody knows it exists but me. I guess you now. It's so humbling. That's all I can say, because I'm just a storyteller. And what do storytellers want to do? We want to touch people's lives. We want to make people better. I say this all the time, and you may be a different writer than me, but me as a writer, my job as a writer is very simple. I want to take my readers, put them in a very uncomfortable position from the safety of their own home, but through that uncomfortable situation, hope to make them a better human being when they come out the other side of my story. That's it. That's all I try to do. So you could say that I have a, agenda or whatever, but I definitely don't have a political leaning agenda, because it's not about my political affiliation is humanity. I am for humans. Yes, humans do stupid things and they divide themselves into stupid categories, and they have all this superficial stuff that they think is really important, like sex and gender and sexuality and race and all this other stuff. But I don't care about any of that. You guys can worry about that, and that's great. I get it. But that's not my business. My business is humanity. And a good story will reach a human regardless of any of those. They're all superficial. If I compel you to cry because of a situation, because of a human tragedy, whatever, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, or gay or straight, or black or white, or religious or not, or Republican or Democrat. You are moved by either the tragedy or the elation or whatever of this human event that I've taken you down. I'm saying, to me personally, my job and my contribution to my fellow human beings is in enlightening stories to make better human beings. That's what I've been called to do, and that's what I try to do. So the rest of you can fight over all that other stuff, because there's plenty of you guys doing. There's so many people fighting over all this stuff. What am I going to add to that conversation?
You can rest assured they're doing a great job fighting over it. So we're perfectly okay. There's
rather saturated at this point.
I think so. I think they have already taken it and ran with it, and they're doing a great job with fighting. But you do have an ability. I've listened to you speak, I've listened to you teach, to take really complex things, to actually make it very, very easy for people to follow and understand. I'm like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, or this is how that will work and make sense. And you're also so relatable. You have an amazing career. You've been doing this for so long. And sometimes when you're starting out and you meet somebody in your stature, your career path, and you're going, there is no way I can ever be that person. I can never achieve to do these things, because there's such a huge gap. At no point in time have you ever addressed or talked that you don't connect with people at a human level, because you're there.
The funny thing is that everyone else sees me way differently than I see me. You're not the first person to ever say something like that to me. And every time it's said to me, I'm like, is there a third Drake that I don't know about? Is there a Drake behind me? Because I definitely don't feel like I'm successful. Actually, that was probably the biggest, most amazing moment of this whole cancer thing for me. Because I never have felt successful. I've never, ever felt it. Not only do I have this health issue going on, I lost 4 years to a different health issue. So from 2015 to 2019, I disappeared. I was still doing the circuit and I was still teaching as much as I was, but I wasn't there. My body betrayed me and my brain stopped working. Literally. I don't have any memory of those 4 years. I had no creativity during those 4 years. Basically, my body stopped making hormones and I didn't know it because it's a gradual thing. But for the male brain without hormones, we literally shut down. Even though I was still teaching, I was teaching by rote. I was literally just regurgitating stuff that I had said a billion times before. And so luckily I'd already, reached that level. From a career standpoint, I lost 4 years and I just tanked everything. In 2019, I get that back. I'm just firing on all cylinders. I've got all this stuff in the works, and then now cancer. Whatever. I'm going to go through that too. I'm going to get over that. I'm going to get back into this. I still have never felt myself as a success. Just what we just talked about. I sold this movie. It didn't get made. I sold this thing. I was the lead fiction writer to a $650 million video game from Sony that was canceled. Like, everything in my career has always been these great opportunities that have never, and that weighs heavy on even my optimistic soul. You get kicked in the teeth and kicked in the teeth and kicked in the teeth and kicked in the teeth. And every time I've gotten up, but every time I'm not going to say that I didn't contemplate just saying, screw it, I'm down. Like, you got me. You finally win. It's just not my personality type. So I don't see myself as a success. I don't, even though and I appreciate that. And I love that. And I'm not trying to belittle any of this. Here's the thing that was the most beautiful moment of having cancer. It was the first time that I realized how many lives I've actually personally, physically touched. And it made me realize that I am a huge success, not necessarily career, financial, fame, fortune, that level, but on a different level of just individually, because I'm very approachable. I put my pants on one leg at a time. Handlers at conventions have the worst time with me because they're like, okay, we're gonna put you out in public for this many, and then we're gonna leave. I'm like, or I'm just gonna stay out there and keep wandering around and talking to people. I'm like, no, we got to put you back in the green room. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to be in the green room. I'm gonna be out here. I just want to talk to people. And one of the cool things about the pandemic was I had a few hundred people that would reach out to me and say, man, I miss the 5 minutes I get to spend with you once a year. And I'd go, yeah, me too. You want to Zoom? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you want to Zoom for an hour or so? And then this was really beautiful because at a convention, I don't have time. I've got a line of people, not hugely successful, but I've always got 3, 4, 8, 10 people waiting to talk to me 24 hours a day. So I'm not like Brandon Sanderson with 300 people in line, but there's still a queue. I got to honor the person behind them and move them on. But with this, I was able to go, so what's your life like? What do you do? Like, because now I got more than 5 minutes. It was really awesome to just get to know.
I'm actually wanted to kind of bring it back to you because you said something that was powerful and I don't think you realize how powerful it is. So you write for humanity and this is your mission. This is your dharma, as we call it. The interesting thing is you said, I'm not successful, yet you never claim your success and your mission to be money and fame. You said humanity. So your success is completely in tune to your dharma. If you would have claimed I wanted to have $1 million, then I would have said, yeah, you're definitely failing at your mission in life. Just put it in reality. But considering that you know exactly what your mission is and how to attach it and how to connect it, you're extremely successful, darling. I'm sorry to break it to you.
Again, but that's a new revelation. And that revelation came from being diagnosed with cancer. I mean, this is all new to me. This is new because
embrace it. Embrace it now.
This is new for me. It really is, because we live in a materialistic world. And especially, I'm a hybrid author. So I am both in self-publishing and in traditional publishing. And in traditional publishing, your value as a writer is in sales. It's not in story quality. It's not in writer quality. It's not in quality of reviews. It's not in how much people relate to your story. It literally is, how many copies have you sold? So 50 Shades of Grey has way more value to them than anything I've ever written. 50 Shades of Grey is not what I would call literary gold. I'll just leave it at that. As a writer, especially trying to make a living at this, I don't have a day job. We live off of either my income coming in or my wife is a kindergarten teacher. We're not living half the hog. We're not rolling in dough. We don't have the big cars and big mansions and all this other stuff. We have, 10-year-old cars that are all paid for. This is the life that we live and we're very happy with it. Everyone who's ever put pen to paper does dream of that New York Times best-selling, multi-million copy selling. You do. We're Americans and we're humans and we want to be successful financially. We want to have a better life. It's the American dream. And it's hard not to get locked up into that. And I definitely was absolutely locked up into that. And so that's why for years when people would come to me and go, oh man, if one day if I could just be like you, and I'm like, just be like me, driving a 10-year-old car and barely being able to pay your bills. You need to have a better aspiration than that, kid. These last couple months have been beautiful, even though they've been terrifying and horrible and everything else that I'm going through. It's been a magical time because I'm very intellectual. I'm constantly thinking about everything. And so even though I'm in this horrible 1 in 3 kill type situation, I still am like, but this is interesting. I'd never gotten an MRI before. I'd never gotten a CT scan before. I'd never been in those tubes. I'm like, oh, look, this is so cool. I'm going to be in this tube. Like, but you're in this tube because you're dying. Right. But I'm going to be in this tube. It's gonna be really cool.
Might as well figure out the experience because this is going to be written somewhere else. So I
Right.
got this.
Right. So, yeah.
Where can our listeners find you? Where they can get more information about you?
So I'm very Googleable. If you just Google Maxwell Alexander Drake, you get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, just me, which is nice. So if you really want to stay up to date with anything that I'm doing, starvingwriterstudio.com. Starving Writer Studio. Yes, that's how I roll. The sign up is up. You can sign up for, because I do a lot. I do the animated cartoons, I do prose, fantasy novels, I do the teaching and everything like that. So I do have some fan bases that are very separate. And I've got people that only want to hear me teach and learn about writing and don't give a crap about reading anything I've ever written ever. And then I've got other people that don't care that I teach at all. They just want to read my fiction. But you can sign up for the mailing list and you can kind of decide what you want to do or all of it. DrakeU.com, which is where all my training stuff is at, will be revamped and relaunched. I do have, I'll get you a link because I do have a package up now. I think there's 48 lessons. It's almost 10 hours of video. It goes a huge gambit of writing from theoretical all the way to practical. It's an overview class, but it's all these little beautiful nuggets and you will absolutely be a better writer just going through it. I want to say they're selling it for like $250 or $260 somewhere in there, but I can give your listeners a 30% off coupon. I'll give you that with the link so that they can use that. Eventually they'll be able to go to drakeu.com and link to it. But right now, because everything's in flux, I'll just get you a link, a little tiny URL link that your listeners can then click on and go right to it. I think the things I'm most excited about for my fans that have been waiting on Genesis Oblivion Saga, that's finally back in again. A book should have dropped on it this year, Cancer. So hopefully it'll still drop this year. I'm just really behind on it, but that should start rolling out a book a year until it's finished here soon. But I think the biggest thing that I'm excited about is a project called Realm of the Dying Sun. And you can go to the website, but there's no website there, but the domain exists. But it is a 20 novel fantasy saga that I'm writing with my 3 proteges that were all trained by me over these last 10 years. 2 of them actually worked for me when I was the lead writer at Sony. I got them on because they were my trainees, my proteges, brilliant writers. We've been working on it since 2019. It will not drop until 2023, but once it starts dropping, we will be dropping a brand new novel every 3 months for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So we've got a ton of stuff already written, ton of novels already written, just sitting there waiting to be released. We have a business plan of this is how much we have to get ahead of the game so that we can continue writing and be able to hit that kind of release schedule. Very excited about that. Soon, within probably March, we're going to start releasing these things called Realm Roundtables, which are little 10, 15-minute videos of the 4 of us talking about the behind the scenes stuff and just all sorts of crazy things on not only the world and world building and all of that, but even like the business side of it and working together as a team and them, what's it like working under my dictatorship? Not really, but it's kind of in that vein. So I'm very excited about the Realm of the Dying Sun. That's going to be it's the most amazing story I've ever come up with in my life. I love the Wheel of Time, where you have all these different civilizations that all have these prophecies, but end up being this one character. Since one character is all these different prophecies and he saves the world. Because that was expansion of what it normally is. You have one society has one prophecy and it's one character that saves the world. So I decided to take it to 11. And so we have 8 individual characters that are all, and they're not prophesized ones. Don't think about it like that. It's just an easy way to explain it. But basically each one of them thinks that they are going to save the world. But in actuality, they only have 1/8 of what is needed. The way I've designed it is each one is being written as if it's their own novel. So they're not traveling together or anything like that. They're just all in the same world and they're all trying to do their own personal thing because they all have different races. It's 7 different races, 2 characters from one race, and then a 1 character from every the other races. So each one of them are on this kind of almost selfish mission to save their race. But the reality is the whole world is going to be destroyed. And so as the story unfolds through the 20 novels, everything becomes just more intertwined and more complex and more just catastrophic. And it's not like they come together like an adventure story where they come together and travel together and save the world, because some of these characters never even know the others exist. But if they didn't do their part, then everything would have failed. And so it's an amazing world and this amazing storytelling. I love the fact that since we did 8 characters and there's 4 writers, each one of us are writing only 2 characters. So you get that author's voice every time when you're in those characters' heads. It's been beautiful. I'm so excited to release this. I can't even begin to tell you my giddiness.
I have seen your plotting process. I understand why it takes you a year and a half. I'm not even like questioning it. I'm like, yeah, I completely understand. Yes, you definitely need to get going. Right faster, honey. Come on. You have a lot.
I do.
So, darling, I am such a fan. And once again, so honored you're on the podcast. Thank you so much. But before you go, are you ready for the lightning round? Because you have to do this before you go.
Oh, didn't know anything about it. Sure.
That's the whole fun. Easy peasy. Do not think too hard about this. Let's see how you do.
You assume that I think too hard about anything.
You might. You can get very prophetic when I least expect it. So I need to kind of warn you. Cold drinks or hot drinks?
Cold.
Okay. Spicy food or sweets?
Neither.
DC or Marvel?
Well, this is the easiest question ever because DC sucks. Like, just flat out. Marvel 100% all the way. You know, there really is only 3 good comic book companies. There's Marvel, there's DC, and there's Batman. Because there's no way Batman could be DC because it actually is decent. They have to be. That's the way I see it.
Fair enough.
Do you want to know why? Do you want me to answer why?
Stu, why do you have this content?
It's not me. It's very simple. It's the world. I mean, Marvel's way more successful in the mass market for everybody, but it's very simple. And this is a writer thing to understand.
Okay.
The reason why DC always sucks, except for Batman, is because DC only focuses on the character's powers. Marvel focuses on the character's humanity.
Yep.
Batman has no powers. DC can't do their stupid little crutch. Like Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman movie, 2/3 of it was freaking amazing. It could have been a great DC movie for the very first time ever. And then they ended that last act with, hey, look, she's a god now. Look at her god. She's a god powers. Look, she's fighting another god with god powers. God powers. Look, isn't that amazing? And then they end it with god powers. Isn't that awesome? No, it isn't. None of that is awesome. It was awesome, her pain and agony over not being able to save everyone. Like that humanity that she showed when she got out of the trench. Like, that's awesome writing. Fighting gods are not awesome. And so, I mean, that's the difference. You know, Spider-Man is not a story about a kid who can stick to walls and is super strong. It's about a teenager trying to find his place in the world. It's about struggling with relationships. And that's why when I was, 14, 15, Spider-Man was everything to me because I totally related to him because it wasn't about the superpowers. And it never has been with Marvel, except for when it is. Like Captain Marvel was a terrible movie because they fell into the trap of, look at her powers, because only strong women can only be strong if they have powers, I guess, which is a horribly insulting way to write a woman, in my opinion, but whatever.
It is. Thank you.
So, this is writing 101. Writing 101. It's not about the powers. It's not about their abilities. It's not about any of that stuff. It's always about the humanity of everything. And Marvel has always done a better job of focusing on that dynamic, that structure. It's let's tell great human stories that these people happen to have superpowers, sure, and that's great to fantasy fulfill, but it's about the human stories that are going to make our audiences care about these characters.
That is officially probably the best explanation of the differences between the two of them. Because most people just have this innate idea why they don't like them. They couldn't actually break it down why. So that is officially the best answer I had for this question. I'm like, you get mad points for that. All right, let's jump.
Well, that
to
is
the
my
next
initials.
One. I know. I was like, oh my God, that is incredible. Nice job. So, early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Nice job. So, thinking of your animated character, you just read us a story. I want you to tell us, kind of since we're in that zone, what animated character best fits your personality?
Wow. I really want to say Peter Griffin, but that would just be a joke. That is a great question. So when I was a kid, I definitely felt that I was Bugs Bunny.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you pulling pranks on people?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also just carefree and not really concerned about consequences and things just kind of work out for you when you have a good attitude or whatever. If I had to say who am I today, it would have to be Mr. Bill. That's going to be an obscure one for everybody because it was a claymation on Saturday Night Live back in the 70s, oh, it's a Mr. Bill show where he just got beaten and hammered and killed and chopped up. And yeah, it would have to probably be Mr. Bill. I have him right over there. He's sitting on my shelf, a Mr. Bill doll. My wife describes my office as a 14-year-old with too big of an allowance. So that's what my office is. There's dragons hanging from the ceiling and just all sorts of crazy stuff.
At least we can make a mental picture of what the office looks like, but it's probably very creative.
And very messy. That's
Yeah.
why I have the backdrop because I don't want you to see what's behind me.
At least we understand. So, darling, thank you again. Do you have any closing comments before we let you go?
This was a lot of fun. I'd love to, if you ever want to have me back on just to chase rabbits or chat about anything, I would love to come back. We haven't started putting people on our podcast yet. So that was one thing when I was talking earlier, I was like, man, we should maybe start thinking about maybe having other people on our podcast because we haven't done that. We've just been
It's fun.
burning through topics, writing topics. So
You can go in any directions. It's absolutely a blast. And other people bring a whole different dynamics to it that you should be surprised. So, yes. So, it is a pleasure, darling. You are absolutely in my prayers. So, keep that amazing attitude.
Thank-
I will be checking up on you, making sure you're doing amazingly well and
Yeah.
still positive and still taking charge of everything in your life.
fine.
To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us in this amazing podcast. Make sure you go ahead and give this show a like. Go follow Mr. Drake, and I will see you next week with another amazing author. Bye, guys.
Bye.